What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we have something special, the new structure deck is finally out and now we can see exactly what Traptrix can do with the new cards that they got. I feel like this deck has always been a very fun favorite deck, and the more support that it gets, the more it gets closer to being an actually really good deck. It's always there, but I feel like the format is always keeping it a little bit behind. But again, the more cards we get, the more we're getting closer to that, and the new cards that we got, I feel like make the deck so much better. They fix a lot of issues that the deck has of not being able to do much turn 1 and all the stuff like that. So yeah, these cards are really good and I'm so excited to show you the deck that I've come up with. Of course, there are so many different things you can put in a trap deck like this because there are so many different trap cards you can incorporate to be able to go first, go second. There are many different options, so leave a comment down below if you have any other ideas of cards that you think would be good in the deck, if you would replace anything, and let's make the deck as good as we possibly can. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So starting off the monsters, we have 3 copies of Traptrix Myrmeleo. This is basically the old-time normal summon of Traptrix, even when the deck was the best deck known as Hut. So this card gets you in one of your trap holes, one normal summon, and on special summon it pops back row. This card is amazing. You're going to be summoning this card a lot from the deck with your Sera to be able to pop more back row, and it's the card you're mostly going to see, you want to see going first, so you can get another interruption. We play 1 copy of Traptrix Mantis. This is a card that on normal summon you can add a Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand, and it has a quick effect that you can target one of your set back row and return to the hand, then you can set another card. So this card can protect your back row from against a card like Cosmic or Twisters. When they target something, you can basically make it so that the card goes back to your hand, you reset it. Yes, you won't be able to activate it again because you just set a trap card, but it's better than that than getting destroyed by something else. So this card gives you a search of a monster. Mainly you're going to be searching of Dioneia to get a follow-up, and it's a really good card overall. Speaking of Dioneia, we play 2 copies of Dioneia. You can kind of play 1 copy, but I feel like if you play only 1 copy, you're not going to have too much of a grind game, because even in a world where you don't have anything else, this card is the greatest top deck. This card is going to give you 1 card rank 4, and when you bring back, for example, your Myrmeleo, you're also going to pop a card. So yeah, this card is a really good normal summon for the later stages of the game, and I feel like that having any Traptrix at the beginning of the game is good, because the thing you're going to want to do the most turn 1 is summon Sera. That's pretty much it. Even if you don't have anything else going for you, you just want to have Sera with a couple traps on your back row, and that's sometimes good enough to win you the game. So I don't feel like any Traptrix in the deck is a brick, because you can all link them for Sera. So even Dioneia turn 1, if it's the only Traptrix you have, it's good enough to be able to go into Sera. Now let's move on to some of the new cards that we got in the structure deck. First, we have 2 copies of Traptrix Arankogaba. This card is a card that you can special summon for free when you have a Traptrix on the field, and it also has like a Heavenly Prison type of effect. As long as you keep it on the field, the first time each of your back row would be destroyed by a card effect, they are not destroyed. So if you don't have access to Heavenly Prison, which is of course a card we run because we're playing a back row deck, but if you don't have access to it, you can keep this card on the field to make sure that your back row don't die to a card like Lightning Storm or Feather Dust or anything like that. If you have your Heavenly Prison, of course this card is an extender you can use to be able to go into a rank 4 and other stuff like that. So it has multiple purposes, so it's a really good card. We have 1 copy of Traptrix Pudica. This is a card that on normal summon you can search the field spell that we got in the structure deck, and if this card is special summon, you can target one of your opponent's special summon monsters, you banish it, and if you do during the next standby phase, your opponent can special summon one of their banished monsters. Unfortunately, this gives them the option of summoning anything that they have in the banish zone, so sometimes against some matchups this is not the greatest effect to use, but if you're using like a Farfa type of effect and your opponent is not going to have pretty much anything else and they're going to get the monster you actually banished, so it's a really good spot removal effect you can use, and sometimes it can be disruptive when you summon it. For example, during your opponent's turn with Sera, you can use this card from your deck to get rid of one of their combo pieces. Yes, they're going to get it back eventually, but it doesn't matter too much if they were not able to combo off because you got rid of one of their best cards, or like the starters or extenders or something like that. Now for the supplementary monsters that we play that I feel like are really good for the deck, first we have 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. This card kinda became a little less important because we did get a new trap card that functions as Shade Brigandine, so we can activate it turn 1 to get more rank 4s, but I still feel like it's too free not to run, because it's a card that as long as you have access to Sera, which if you don't, you're not playing anyway, so you can get another rank 4 under your Sera. Mainly you're going for Rafflesia, and then with Rafflesia you can protect your Sera while also getting more disruption, so I still feel like Parallel Exceed is a really free card for the deck. And we're playing, of course, 3 copies of Lord of the Heavenly Prison. This card is an amazing card for any trap deck. It protects your back row, it gives you access to potentially a pot card or anything else that you want, and it gives you a 3k body to close out games, because again, trap decks are notorious for not being able to put enough damage on the board, so this card fixes that issue as well. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. You can replace this with anything pretty much, but if you play a card like Desires, we do play some one-offs in the deck, so you would have tweak some ratios. But again, the deck does have enough draw power with one of the new cards that it got that if you don't have access to Prosperity, you can basically play more copies of the card I'm going to show you later, so you can have more draw power in the deck. So you don't feel forced to play a card like this because the deck is still very, very budget if you exclude this card. So it's a card that it's going to make the deck more expensive, but without it, a lot of people are going to be able to pick up this deck. So I know that because it's a structure deck, not many people want to play a card like this, so you can replace it with more copies of the next card, which is the one copy of Traptrix Allure. With this card, you can discard a level 4 insect or a plant monster or a normal trap card to draw 2 cards. So again, if you don't have Prosperity, play 3 copies of this card. It's going to give you draw power. The reason I'm playing only 1 copy is because I am playing Prosperity and they contradict, so we want to see this card later in the game when we don't have Prosperity, so we can get some more draws, and also because of its graveyard effect, because you can banish this card from the grave to target one of your banished level 4 insect or a plant monsters, or one of your banished normal trap cards, and you place it at the bottom of the deck, so you can use this card to make sure you don't run out of resources, because we're not playing too many trap holes, because they are not the greatest of trap cards. We're playing them just because they're very, very searchable and activatable from the deck with Rafflesia, so we need to be able to recycle the good ones that we play all over again. We play 1 copy of the field spell, which is 1 copy of Traptrix Or card. This is a card that you can search with your Pudika, and it's a card that gives you an extra normal summon for Traptrix, which is something really, really good, because as long as you get to the later stages of the game, the more monsters you see in your hand, the less plays you can actually do, because again, you can only normal summon once, but because of this card, if you have, for example, like a Dionia and a Myrmeleo, not only can you get the Wolf Perk effect, but you can also search a card, or if you have a Mantis, search another monster. So the extra normal summon is something the deck really, really needed, because the hands you lose, this goes very much any trap deck, but for more for this deck specifically, are the hands that you draw either too many monsters or no monsters at all. So this card can fix the hands where you have too many monsters. And because it's searchable, we don't really need to play more than 1 copy. It also protects your instant and plant monsters when we destroy by battle once per turn. So if you only have Sera on the field, you can protect her, which is usually Rafflesia's job, but now this card can do it as well. And you can banish a monster you control to special summon a Traptrix from your hand or your graveyard, so you can basically tutor out something that you don't need for something that can get an effect off, like a Myrmeleo to pop it back. Now let's move on to the juice of the deck, which is of course the trap cards, since we're playing a trap deck. First we have the trap holes, so let's start with them. We have 1 copy of Gravedigger's Trap Hole. Now, in the previous format, when Isuzu tier was the end-all be-all for pretty much anything, I would play more copies of this card, but now it's not the greatest card for the best matchups. So it's still a really, really good card, but I feel like as a one-off it's okay. We play 1 copy of Flatgate Trap Hole. Against a lot of decks, now Book of Mooning a card basically stops them a lot, because they are using it for either Xyz plays or Link plays, especially against Kashtira. If you Book of Moon one of their monsters, they don't play anything other than Xyz, so they're not going to be able to use it for pretty much anything, so it's a really good card. And we also play 1 copy of Bottomless Trap Hole to be able to remove something, which is good sometimes with one of the Xyz monsters that we got, because you want to be able to get rid of the monsters from the field in order to use them for something else, like attaching them to the Xyz monster as material, which we're going to talk about once we get to the extra. We have 3 copies of Traptrix Holiday. This card is basically the Shade Brigandine of the deck. We are of course playing Shade Brigandine as well, because it's such a powerful card, but this card gives you more trap cards you can use turn 1, so you can trigger Sera. So this is basically another level 4 monster you can summon for free. You can discard one of your Traptrix, or we can discard one of your trap cards to be able to activate it the turn it was set. So you can use this card, get your Sera's effect off, and you basically get a free level 4 from the deck and rank 4 on the board. Because it's a trap card, similarly to Shade Brigandine, Redoer is an amazing card with it, so if you want to summon that, you can. You can of course summon Rafflesia to be able to protect your Sera, or you can summon your Gallant Granite to search your Heavenly Prison if you feel like, for example, games 2 or 3, your opponent has sided in all of their back row hate, and you need to be able to play around that. We play, of course, 3 copies of Shade Brigandine, basically the same thing, but more free. You don't have to discard a trap card in order to be able to activate this card, and it's a card that does the same thing. It gives you a level 4 body on the field. With Sera, you're going to be able to get anything from the deck, you're going to trigger an effect, you're going to trigger Sera again, you're going to set one of your trap holes, and you're going to go into one of your rank 4s. We play 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device. Now, we do need to play normal trap cards in order to trigger Sera. You can play a lot of cards that are normal trap cards, but I feel like the less normal traps you play, the less consistent Sera is going to be. So I feel like even though these cards are not nearly as good as a card like, for example, Solemn Strike or something like that, they're still better for this archetype specifically because they trigger Sera's effect. So yeah, Compulsory is a spot removal that is going to trigger Sera. We have 3 copies of Lost Wind. This is a card that can trigger Sera as well, while also recurring itself pretty much every time you use it. So it's basically playing 6 copies of this card. So when your opponent summons anything from the extra deck, you're going to reset this from your graveyard, so you're going to be able to use it twice. Being able to activate this card at the damage step, have one of your opponent's monsters attack, can be used really, really often. Sometimes it's even better than negating something, especially when you go into grindier games where you're trying to go for beatdown and your opponent summons something bigger than your monsters, you can protect them with a card like this, and of course you can always use it as an imperm type of effect. And the last card in the main deck is 3 copies of Ghost in a Match. Now, even though this card is not a normal trap card, this deck can still play Floodgates, and with Kashtira being so powerful in this format, this card is so good. Kashtiras are always different attributes, so this card hurts them a lot, and even though this card can sometimes contradict with some of your cards, for example like Heavenly Prison being a dark monster, or Parallel Exceed being a wind monster if you draw it later in the game, again, the payoff is so worth against decks like Kashtira and a lot of other decks that you have to play a card like this in order to be able to survive, because again, we are playing a slower trap deck, so we need to be able to control the tempo of the game, and if we get, for example, aura zones locked, either we go first or go second because our traps were not enough to disrupt them, we are not going to be able to play, so we need to card like this in order to survive in a meta like this. Now, moving on to the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Traptrix Sera. This is by far the best Link 1 monster that was restricted to its own archetype. So, unlike a lot of other Link 1s, like for example Nightmare Mermaid or something like that, this card is fair by being in its own archetype, and it's unfair if you read it for its own archetype. So this card, every time you activate a normal trap card, you can special summon a Traptrix from your deck, and then you are going to trigger the Traptrix's effect when you summon, and when you activate one of your Traptrix's monster's effect, you can set a whole normal trap from your deck. Both of these effects are of course once per turn. This card you can basically have, as long as you have any Traptrix monster in your hand, you can link away into this card, and by playing 11 along with 3 copies of Prosperity, we're basically guaranteed to see at least one to be able to go into this card, and it's a card you're going to be summoning so many times throughout the game. Every time your opponent gets rid of it, you're going to summon another one, which is definitely why you need to play 3 copies, because the moment you run out of Sera, it's the moment you run out of gas, basically, because this card does so much for the deck, you always want to have access to it. We play 1 copy of Traptrix Kularia. The main reason we're playing Kularia is basically because we want to link climb sometimes, because we did get a really good Link 3 monster in the structure deck, so this card, it doesn't do too much on its own, but it's a Link 2 monster, so this card, again, it's another monster that's unaffected by trap effects. I haven't been mentioning this effect because I feel like either everybody knows of it by now because it's a gimmick of Traptrix, or it doesn't matter too much against you're playing against some specific matchups, but yes, a lot of Traptrix do have this effect. They're either unaffected by trap holes, which is mainly for the main deck monsters, and the extra deck monsters are unaffected by trap effects in general. So yeah, this card, after you activate a whole normal trap card, you can set it instead of setting to the graveyard, and during your end phase, you can target a Traptrix in your graveyard and you special summon it. It's not a card you want to keep on the field for too long, mainly only for 1 turn sometimes in order to recycle some things, but again, it's a card you're most of the time going to be linking away into the new Link 3 that we got, which is the 1 copy of Traptrix Adipus. It's a Link 3 that requires 2 monsters, including a plant or an insect, so this card can sometimes be summoned even with a card like Parallel Exceed, because it's a card that it doesn't require too many specific attributes, just 1 plant or an insect. So yeah, this card, again, unaffected by trap effects, and Traptrix monsters you control gain 1000 attack while you have a normal trap in your grave, which you're always going to have, and again, sometimes this deck kinda struggles with dealing damage. This card fixes some of these issues because it boosts all your monsters, so this deck is very easy on spamming the board with like 5 or 6 Traptrix monsters, including the extra monster zone, so you can use a lot of them by boosting them to 1000 attack to attack over your opponent's monsters. And once per turn, you can target face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of insect and plant monsters you control, you negate their effects, and then you can banish a normal trap from your graveyard to destroy one of the cards you targeted. So it's a card that can be kinda used as a Dark Ruler No More effect to just negate your opponent's board, while also being spot removal by removing one of your trap cards. We are playing 1 copy of Access Code Talker because again, the deck does spam so much, so we can use this card fairly easily in order to be able to destroy our opponent's board, so we can use it as a Link Climb out for Link 3, so you can negate the entire board, and then you can summon this card to clear the entire board. And for the Xyz monsters, we do have quite a few. First, we have 1 copy of Rafflesia. This is the card that is going to be protecting your Sera most of the time while also giving you more interruptions, so it's a card you want to be summoning ASAP. We have 1 copy of Traptrix Pingulika. This card is a card that came out in the structure deck, which is a fairly nice addition to the deck, I would say. It's not the greatest card compared to the other stuff that we got, but it's a decent card to have in the extra deck. So, while this card has Xyz material, it is unaffected by trap effects and by the effects of monsters with the same type as any of those materials. Now, you might be wondering, this card is going to be having only insects or plants, or mainly cybers, for example, if you have your Parallel Exceed, because you're summoning on its own. But it has an effect that you can detach a material from this card to add a Traptrix monster from your deck to your hand, so you can search. The important thing is that if a monster that is owned by your opponent is sent to the graveyard or banished by one of your card effects, you can attach them to it as material. So this is why I mentioned removing cards with a card like Bottomless Trap Hole can be important, specifically for this card, because you can banish one of your opponent's monster with Bottomless Trap Hole, and then you can attach it to this card, and because your opponent is, for example, playing an only type of deck, the moment you attach one of their own monsters on this card becomes an unaffected monster by pretty much anything they have in the deck. So it has that gimmick going for it. Again, it's a card that can give you a search, and it's kind of resilient. It's not the most important card of the deck, but it's decent to have in the extra deck. For the generic ones, we play one copy of Redoer. Redoer is amazing in this deck, especially now because we have basically 6 copies of Shade Brigantine, so we can always have a trap under Redoer to make use of it as a disruption. We're playing one copy of Baguska because we're relying on Sera a lot of the times. If you know your opponent is playing a deck that gets killed by Baguska, even if you don't have like any traps in your hand, you can sometimes get your turn back by having Sera and Baguska on board, and then you're going to be able to use your Sera's effect even during your opponent's turn because it's unaffected by Baguska because it's a linked monster, so you can use this card very well in the deck. We play one copy of Abyss Dweller. Of course, if you're playing against a matchup that is going to rely a lot on the graveyard, even though it's not going to happen nearly as often as previous format because Isizu Tier was the best deck, but now it's going to happen less often, but still, once you see a deck that relies too much on the graveyard, this card is going to be your ticket victory. We're playing one copy of Gallant Granite, being able to search our Heavenly Prison. This card is mainly used for games 2 and 3 because not many people main deck cards like Lightning Storm, but you know a lot of people are siding them, so you know a lot of people are going to post game 1, may sometimes maybe even make you go first because they're confident of their side deck. So yeah, this card is going to be super important post siding to be able to search Heavenly Prison to protect your back row. And we also have the Zodiac package. We have one copy of Chakanine, which you're going to overlay into your one copy of Borbo. You're going to attack directly with your Borbo, and then you're going to go into your one copy of Sky Thunder Zeus on top of it with 4 materials, and you can use it to clear board. The problem with this engine sometimes is that you're forced to destroy your own Sera with Zeus because it's not easy to summon a rank 4, or it's not very optimal to summon rank 4 before you have Sera on the field because she's going to give you advantage, but Zeus's effect is something that is going to basically destroy your own board as well. So sometimes summoning this card and just it being on the board threatening to destroy the board is better than actually destroying the board because you're going to lose a lot of resources as well. So it's something you have to use with caution, but it's something that helps so much going second because the deck, again, it's a trap deck. It kind of relies on its Xyz monsters to do some damage going second because you don't have too much otherwise. You can always strive to go for an access code turn 1, which is not too difficult because we do spam a lot with the cards that we got right now and with the searching we have, but this card feels more free than going for an access code going second, and it can also give you 2 wipes at 1. So yep, that's it guys. This deck just got so much better with a structure deck, and I'm pretty sure that Konami is not done giving support to this deck. It has gotten so much support throughout the couple past years, and we're definitely certain that we're going to get even more cards, and the cards that we get are always pretty much on point. The cards that we have gotten help the deck so much, and it's a fun deck. It's a trap deck that can basically adapt to any type of format to be able to beat any type of deck. It's now really budget because of the structure deck. Again, if you don't have Prosperity, don't feel forced to play it. You can play more copies of Allure for draw power, and you have a super budget deck, a super fun deck to play, and a super strong deck at that. So yep, that's the video guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.